Here's my 5-minute update. It seems that Russia is attacking Europe through drones, which pop up at airports and other places where hundreds of thousands of people speculate or are given an opportunity to speculate exactly what it is that's causing the enormous disruption to their travel plans. It happened in Oslo, I think. It happened in Copenhagen just before that summit of European leaders this week. Most recently in Munich, sort of drip of incidents that keeps drones and Russians in the public mind. I'm skeptical that it's Russians. They don't actually name the Russians, but I'll give you my expertise on this area. I think it's probably a training exercise. What a lot of people don't realize is that Northern Europe sees every autumn, I think, exercises in the Baltic and the North Sea involving NATO nations and many vessels and vehicles. It's all spread out. And these drone attacks could be both, we don't know. It's easy enough to be a Western drone unit doing these sorts of things. And both to test civil defences, to train drone operators as part of the NATO exercises taking place, which no one talks about, and as a way, of course, to keep support for the war against Russia going among the public, this drumbeat of propaganda, and to make people fear and worry about the Russians, to create a consensus for continued support of Ukraine, which is losing huge numbers of soldiers. Now, my little special insight into this, I wrote a book called Ghost Hunt, which I've just recently re-released, and you can find it on my WordPress page and on Amazon. I first wrote the book a couple of years ago. I've re-edited it and put out a 2025 version. And it's surprisingly apposite, because what it talks about is the submarine operations carried out in the early 1980s in Swedish waters against the ultimate target was the Swedish public, but most immediately the Swedish Coastal Defence Forces. They were universally held to be Soviet subs that were perhaps preparing for an invasion or provoking the Swedes. And the most high-profile event was in the autumn of 1982, but it happened in the years that followed, in the decade that followed, 1 or 2 high-profile submarine hunts a year. It was a year. It was a time, of course, when there was very little alternative media and no internet or anything like that. And the state television, with its 2 channels, focused on these events almost as if it was a sort of Wimbledon final or a Wimbledon tournament. So, for the 2 weeks that it took place, there would be daily coverage, endless speculation, talking heads during daytime television, which was not normally the case. Normally back in those days, television started in the evening only. And I remember doing my homework at sort of 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and these uniformed, very serious Swedish naval officers talking about the submarine. The submarine hasn't been found and still hasn't been caught and so on. And there were footage of Swedish helicopters and naval patrol boats patrolling that part of the archipelago, of the Swedish archipelago, which is vast and has southern components, and it's outside Stockholm as well, and outside Gothenburg, where the submarine had been said to be tracked. And then there was followed by a report a few months later saying it was Soviet submarines, and there's diplomatic complications, and it became a world news event. BBC would be there and so on. And this sort of thing defined Swedish people's decade, 1980s, and it made people incredibly hostile towards Russia. No submarine was ever surfaced, and the Cold War ended, and then a number of books became written about it, and it was all revealed to be, based on forensic evidence and some internal documents, to be Western and NATO submarines that were doing it for those reasons, to provoke a reaction. Even Caspar Weinberg, as defense secretary in the US, said, well, we did it, as did John Walker, who said, yes, who was the head of British naval intelligence, I think. He was quoted in the Associated Press saying, we were allowed a certain number of intrusions per year, and the Swedish requirement, our demand on the Swedes was that they not use torpedoes. So it was a very realistic training exercise for British submariners. And the Swedes, of course, the civil defences, the coastal defences, which were weakly developed, got training as well. But the main thing is, of course, to create a political consensus against Russia. And I think this is merely an updated version of it. And I'll be talking a little bit more about these things going forward.